Okay. All right. So, how many of you have played Candy Crush? All right. How about Angry Birds? How about Clash of Clans? Okay. Now, how about League of Legends? TF2? Hearthstone? Right. Well, if you raise your hand for at least one of those things, then you've played a free-to-play game before. That's what I did my project on. Free-to-play games and how they have and will impact the industry. But, so what is free-to-play? In the simplest sense, free-to-play games are games that are simply free to download. As seen here. Most, if not all, gameplay is unlocked or activated for free, but you can buy microtransactions or in-app purchases in order to unlock more content. This content can be anything ranging from player perks to additional levels to cosmetics, basically anything that the game wants. This model is often called freemium. It's free on the outside, but should you wish to unlock more, you gotta pay. The other predominant games model right now, other than free-to-play, is the pay-to-play model, which has always been traditionally the games industry's favorite model. It's kind of like traditional games. Think of, like Nintendo. You go to the store, you pay 40 bucks for a Mario game, and you stick it in your console, and then you get to play it. You don't have to actually unlock anything for money after you've bought the game. However, free-to-play hasn't really been very well received, especially among more serious gamers. Most gamers see it as a blatant cash grab by game companies, an excuse to put out less content and ultimately charge more. People used to the pay-to-play model find the free-to-pay model disorienting. Content is locked behind paywalls, and gameplay is often more simplistic than they'd like it to be. And this quote from Daniel Floyd of the YouTube show Extra Credits pretty much summed the current situations up. Developers have no idea what they're doing. So, how do you actually create a good free-to-play game? Basically, there's two main things that make free-to-play games work. Of course, there's more, but these are the two main ones, and they are player engagement and effective monetization. I'll be first illustrating these points using games from games that you might already know, maybe you don't, and then I'll be showing you how the game that I designed and prototyped and coded as part of my hands-on project applies to these models. So, first up, player engagement, because nobody wants to play boring games. Engaging gameplay is a must, but so is player retention. Essentially, that's making your players come back for more. Therefore, you need to make sure that your gameplay is nuanced enough to appeal to a core group of gamers, but also interesting enough to a wide variety, but also simplistic enough in order to attract people who otherwise wouldn't be interested in video games. And so that's why games like Angry Birds ultimately fell out of relevance, and why nobody cares about the movie that's coming out soon, because they had little to no player retention. It's a little hard to justify keeping support for a game around when there's nobody else to play it with. So then, how do we get to this engaging gameplay? Simple. Have a good core loop. Essentially, core loops are a series of actions that players can do over and over and over again to keep them coming back for more. This might sound like a bit of a daunting concept, but trust me, you've seen it before. For example, here's the core loop for something you've probably seen before: getting a cup of coffee at Starbucks. So we can see here that you can buy coffee, you earn points, get rewards, which entice you to buy more coffee. Loop goes around and around. By looping this act of buying your morning latte into a reward system, Starbucks essentially entices you to come back for more. And it works the exact same way in all games too. Here's basically what the core loop for most traditional games is. Do things to get more stuff, to buy gear to do other things. To get more specific, here's Farmvilles. You have to sell crops. You have to sell crops to make money, to buy more crops, to sell and to buy and whatever. This loop is what made Farmville so addictive. It keeps going around and around and around. So whatever goal you think you had just gets pushed further and further along, enticing you to spend much more time with the game. So now let's talk about my project. I designed and prototyped a small freemium game called Word Smash. Isn't it cute? It's a puzzle game with a lot of RPG elements. Essentially, you solve word puzzles to defeat and collect monsters, and use your collected monsters in order to defeat and collect other monsters. Yay, core loops. But so I have an entire game design document written for this project, but I think it'd be a lot more interesting if I showed a small gameplay demo instead. So, here is a typical dungeon screen. On the bottom is a word puzzle, on the right is my team of monsters, and towards the middle is my HP bar. I'm currently up against this cute little radish thing, so let's make a word using the letters on the board and see how much damage we can do. The way that words work in this game is that you pretty much link consecutive letters with each other, and it works diagonally as well. So like, for example, I can do scent, or like pals. Do you guys see any more words, or?
Dog. Rat.
Yeah, dog is there. Yeah, rat over there. All right, so the word that I actually used here was quartet. I've created the word, the letters have disappeared, and more have fallen in. So, yeah, and more falling in right now. The total damage I deal up here is calculated by a mix of factors, including the rarity of letters, or the length, or how common the word is. As you can probably see, nobody really uses quartet in everyday speech. So then, that damage is applied to that little guy, who somehow managed to survive, and he attacks, and then it goes on from there. It was actually brought to my attention a couple of days ago that if I had used the word liberate instead, it would have given me enough damage to take him down, but oh well, what's done is done. Anyway, this game's design is very modular. The game's basic mechanics are the same for each dungeon, and through a bit of tweaking for enemy behaviors, it's really easy to create levels that increase in difficulty and look progressively cooler to keep players playing. So now, let's talk about the other thing, effective monetization, because starving developers need to eat somehow. So this is the bread and butter of free-to-play gaming, because it's a little hard to make a game when you don't have any cash. I'll primarily be talking about mobile here. PC mobile monetization is a very different beast, but since my hands-on project is about mobile, I feel like that'd be a little more interesting. So there's three main strategies in order to getting people to pay for your game, and they are impulse purchases, plan purchases, and these things called gotchas. I'll explain more later. But so, going on to impulse purchases, Candy Crush's extra lives are pretty much the textbook example of impulse purchases. Players generally feel vulnerable when they fail the level. Their thoughts can range anything from, that was completely unfair, to, I'm so close, just one more shot. So by implementing a prompt to let players purchase extra lives, it's possible to turn player frustration into monetization while getting rid of that frustration on players' end. And sure, it's a bit mean, but it's a dog-eat-dog world, free-to-play gaming, So, as for plan purchases, cosmetics in pretty much any free-to-play game are plan purchases. This particular one is from Kim Kardashian Hollywood, because that's just what happened. I happened to have my iPad at the time. Don't judge me too hard for it. But mobile games seem to have slightly less of this, but that's not to say that they aren't uncommon. Case in point. Prices don't really fluctuate as much, so players can plan out their money when buying these things, and developers can usually get away with charging a bit higher as well. So like, for example, where most impulse purchases would be maybe $1-ish, plan purchases can be anywhere from $5 or, above. And so finally, we have the gotcha. So these are basically like one of those little grocery store capsule machines that you see, on the way out from Walmart. They have a random chance of getting preset items or characters. These things originally originated in Japan and spread to the rest of Asia as a game mechanic. It's actually really heavily regulated there, as it's classified under gambling, so there's a giant list of rules for things that developers can and can't do to the gachas. It's like 250 pages, it's ridiculous. But yeah, so Hearthstone's gacha is pretty much like this. You buy a pack of cards and you unpack them, meaning that you take them apart for a random assortment of other cards. Some might be valuable, most of them aren't, but hey, that's the gambling aspect. So let's go back to talking about my game now. So remember this dungeon from a couple of slides back? It's okay if you don't. Let's just say I died to it. Whoops. So impulse purchases are basically this. When players die, they can have the option to revive for a negligible fee. So yeah, there's no way I was beating that dungeon. The dragon was too hard. I can't. So now that I'm back at the menu and I've clicked no, I remember that I've been meaning to buy some more gems for a couple of weeks now. So I can go to the store So I can go to the store and spend some real life money on in-app gem purchases. These are a planned purchase. And so finally, if I decide that I need stronger monsters, I can use the gacha in order to get rare monsters that cannot be obtained from dungeons, usually with stronger skills or better stats. For example, this guy's pretty overpowered. His skill guarantees a 6+ letter word on the board, which is pretty cool. But yeah, so in conclusion, many people seem to think that free-to-play is a devolution of proper gaming. They see simplistic gaming and blatant cash grabs and assume that all free-to-play games are like that. Now, I'm not saying that free-to-play, not all games, not saying that there aren't terrible free-to-play games, but good free-to-play games are actually an evolution of gaming. They effectively bring this sort of pick-up-and-play gameplay that has the gaming industry that's been trying to branch out for so long and combine it with a really nifty way of making money. So, big-budget pay-to-play games aren't going anywhere. Just look at Call of Duty, for example. But however, large publishers could learn a thing or two about player engagement from the free-to-play model and apply that to their own games. But, in conclusion, no. Free-to-play games are not the end of modern entertainment as we know it. Instead, they're the start of a new era in gaming.
Perfect. Thank you so much.